hundreds of pedal builds behind you and multiple designs brought to life, what is the hardest part about getting a new design finalized? A lot of the time the breadboarding is really difficult because it's not laid out in a way that my goddamn brain works. But once that is overcome, like honestly the hardest part is picking the features to keep in the pedal, because there's always a million options that you could put on a pedal, which is why there's a bunch of different versions of the Devi Ever pedals, some with more and some with less features, and then like super deluxe versions with tons of features. Another good example of that is the pitch grinder, which could do a whole bunch of other things, but then you have to have an interface for that. And we were already in like the biggest pedal box, and it's got 10 knobs on it and 2 foot switches and a toggle, and it gets to a point where like, how much more can you fit in? And the answer on the pitch grinder was none more, because that's crazy. Each Dwarfcraft pedal by design has the propensity to be unruly. In fact, the Great Destroyer actually comes with a safe mode to rein in madness. Do you ever get calls from confused musicians asking for direction on how to set up or even use one of your pedals? Well, we do get a lot of emails from folks who are confused, and most of the time it's an email about how my pedal's broken, and then the response is, I'm pretty sure it's fine and it's supposed to do that, or I'm pretty sure it's fine and your cables or your power supply is not good. We try to solve these problems via email, and still 3/4 of the pedals that we do get shipped back to us are just fine. I've heard from people at companies that are less extreme, I guess, or unpredictable. They get the same emails. They get tons of pedals back that work just fine. Shrug, yeah. What's the story behind the name Dwarfcraft? That's why we're making this informative vid interview. I would say 2001, 2002. I was having some trouble recording directly into my PC, which had a line in and a microphone in, 1/8" inputs, and I drew up a design for a little wiring solution, basically a super primitive audio interface that would just make it easier for me to plug things in and out. I never ended up using that. On that drawing, I just wrote Dwarfcraft, because not too terribly long before I had read some Lord of the Rings books, and I was like, the dwarves, they can make things. I thought if I were to make something, I would want to aspire to that dwarven level of craftsmanship and ingenuity. Is there a pedal tone you've been chasing that you haven't captured yet? A lot of the time I'm trying to get after that tone from Sun. Honestly, the band, not the amp, because you can make the amp Sun anyways. But it's just such a huge distortion with tons of sustain and everything. But, I mean, this is probably a product of recording more than the pedals itself, but it's such a big raging distortion. But when it gets to your ears, it's almost like soothing. It ends up sort of fuzzy and soft. The Devi Ever Big Distortion Sound Machine, that was definitely a tone I was going for, because I really loved the Ruiner by itself and in certain mixes and things like that. But if you were to kick that on with like a full band, like the harmonic response in that is such that if there's cymbals crashing and another guitar or something, like you're really pretty much just going to hear the fundamental low end on that. And it is a huge low end, which is very cool. But I wanted something with that that would just be totally shreddy and nasty, and I guess just fill up all that harmonic space that wasn't there on the ruiner. I did a few experiments with mixing the circuits in one pedal, and then just kind of swapped out other distortion circuits in the place where the TP ended up. And none of them were quite right until I hit the TP. That was the bee's knees to my ears. Anyway, all right, another question. After creating so many great pedals, you obviously have acquired a ton of experience, but even you had a first time putting solder to circuit board. This is true. Any advice for people who might be cracking open their first pedal for repair, or who might be embarking on a new design? Okay, first advice on repairing a pedal. That's the worst thing in the world. Like, why are you doing that to yourself? I would advise you to avoid that whenever possible. Unless you're into it, I guess I shouldn't yuck somebody else's yum. But if you have to, and this goes along with creating a new design, number one, use good tools. When you go about making anything really with shit tools, it makes it really difficult. I've narrowed it down to, I have one needle nose pliers that I prefer above all others. It's not a brand thing, it's just a shape of the needle nose. Good soldering iron makes things a lot easier. We just recently got cool little wire clippers that lets you cut super close to the PCB. That was the chair. I didn't fart. If you're embarking on a new design,
please embark on a new design.
Try to participate in the evolution instead of just hanging on nostalgia, and don't come at it trying to make money. If you're just chasing dollars, you're going to be putting out middle of the road or worse pedals to just try and sell. So just make something new, make something awesome, make something that makes you feel good. Specific, like technical things would be, you want to kind of keep the final object in mind when you're working on it, so you don't end up with no space for jacks or things like that. It's really helpful to me to draw things out, just to get a general sense of space in a pedal enclosure. If you are planning on selling these things, you're going to want to keep careful track of your expenses and the time taken and everything like that, so you don't end up selling things at a loss because you didn't math enough. I was definitely selling great destroyers at a very low price early in the history of Dwarfcraft. But then I realized, I was making like 3 cents an hour. And anybody who's worked for 3 cents an hour will tell you that that's not a living wage. It's significantly lower.
Dwarfcraft devices, baby!